here I am live from Tier 4 UK to speak to you all about The Crown. So, The Crown, it's been controversial, season 4. So, a few things to say just to start with. And thank you, Gail. I hope you're well too, and Merry Christmas to you. Um, I am a royalist. Probably no major surprise. I know not everyone who's part of the Royal History Geeks community is, for very understandable reasons, but I am. I am also a big fan of The Crown, all 4 seasons. I think that they've been fantastic television. I think they've been beautifully produced. I think they have been phenomenally well cast, and I like Olivia Colman too. I think people that say, "Oh, she doesn't look as much like the Queen as Claire Foy." Well, that's true. It's not really her fault, though, is it? I think she's portrayed the role brilliantly, and where I've had problems with her role or her portrayal is a problem with the script rather than her acting. So it's wonderful, and I've watched them all. I will watch season 5 when it comes out, despite the reservations that I'm going to talk about in this chat. So, all historical fiction, and The Crown is historical fiction. That's effectively what it is. I know, I agree, Anna. They are brilliantly well cast. I love, I like historical fiction, and of course, historical fiction. Clues in the name. It is fiction. It is allowed to take liberties with the factual truth. And frankly, not only is it allowed, it has to be successful. Because one of the beauties of historical fiction is it fills in the blanks. It gives an interpretation or a view of what could have happened that we will never know for factual um, in factual exploration. So it's interesting, even in its own right as a historical exercise. It's quite interesting, and I have during my time of writing and researching things found areas of history where we're frankly never going to know. And I think, well, wouldn't fiction be an interesting way of presenting some of the possibilities? However, I think there are two rules which any historically based production, so basically any production, hello Dawn, that uses people, the lives of people that have really lived, should obey two rules. One, the first rule is something I got from Alison Weir. I don't say just me, just tell me, she tells people all the time, which is that everything that is said should be based, however loosely, on something. So she uses the example of in The Other Boleyn Girl, um, Philippa Gregory portrays Anne Boleyn as considering sleeping with her brother, George, in order to create an heir. Now, while that is not true, that did not happen, almost certainly, because it was based on the fact that Anne and George were accused of incest. It is based on something, therefore, it is legitimate to do that in historical fiction. So that's one rule, has to be based on something, however loose. The second rule, um, for me, and this is my rule for historical fiction, is that if these people that we're talking about have really lived, which of course they have, and in case of The Crown, many or most of them are still alive today, your portrayal of them should not fundamentally distort their character beyond which we have evidence for. Now, I know that's quite hard because stories, history works by nuance, and well, he may have said this or she may have said that, but here's a footnote here, here's a long explanation, here's one theory, here's an alternative theory. Fiction doesn't. Fiction works in villains and heroes, basically. So I do understand that it's hard with fiction. But nonetheless, I believe that if it's talking about someone that really lived, it must not fundamentally distort their character. And that is why I have a problem with a lot of the Philippa Gregory TV adaptation stuff, is I think it often fundamentally distorts the characters of people like Margaret Beaufort. I do not mind that they're placed into situations which they wouldn't really have been in, or shown to play a bigger role in things that they really wouldn't have. That's all in scope, but a distortion of their character to me is unacceptable. So, with those two rules in mind, I believe that there are at least four. Okay, there are more than four. I've just chosen four because it's series 4. See what I did? Clever synergy of four for four. Four things of where I really feel that season four of The Crown distorted historical truth in a way that is not acceptable. So the first one, and this is my biggest one, is the episode which featured the Queen Mother's nieces, where effectively she had nieces who suffered from illness and mental disabilities. And it suggests in The Crown that when the Queen Mother became Queen, these girls were locked up, hidden from sight. Everyone was told they were dead in order to protect the Queen Mother or Queen Elizabeth, as she was then, from any suggestion that her line may be contaminated and that the monarchy is in trouble, that these girls were effectively sacrificed. Now, Gareth Russell, historian and writer, has written some brilliant pieces, which I've shared on Facebook, saying this is just factually incorrect. So, the girls in question. So first of all, he rightly states the Queen, the Elizabeth Bowes line, the Queen Mother, was from a very large family, of which she was the youngest child, or was she the second youngest child? I can't remember, but she is, if not the youngest, she's the second youngest, and she. She would have had a very different relationship with her older siblings, who were really a generation older than her, and their family. She wouldn't have known the intimate details of their family situation all the time in the way that we might of our siblings. What we do know is that her nieces were confined to a mental institution, which roughly coincided with the time that her sister-in-law, her brother's sister, the mother of the children in question, was widowed. And so that's probably explains why she felt she needed it. It was in 1940, which was 4 years after the Queen Mother became Queen. So it is not connected to a need to a need to fend the line of the Queen Mother and to hide her from accusations that her line might be contaminated. That is simply not true. There is no reason to believe that the Queen Mother knew anything about it until it was revealed to her in the 80s, when she was in her 80s, and at that point she sent money and gifts to her nieces and to the home. And that's information from Gareth Russell, which I think is very important for people to know. The second reason, hold your thoughts. I'm just going to have a sip of my drink. And Natalie saying she feels the same about the White Princess because it crossed the line and portraying Henry VII, and I completely agree. The characters, for whatever reason, these, to an extent, Philippa Gregory, but also the TV adaptations have chosen to portray the Tudors, in these sense, Henry VII and Margaret Beaufort, as villains. And it's not clear why, particularly Margaret. It's not clear why they've made that creative decision. And it is a distortion, and it is that distortion which is unacceptable. But back to the Crown. So, second thing, which I feel was a step too far, was Margaret Thatcher asking the Queen to dissolve Parliament. Now, it's not clear. So, in the UK, just to give you a little bit of British constitutional law, in the UK, to dissolve Parliament means to call a general election. However, I'm not sure that's what the writers of The Crown intended Margaret Thatcher to mean. I think they were nodding to the time recently when Boris Johnson tried to prorogue Parliament in order to stop Parliament making him send a letter to the EU to cancel Brexit. I think it was they're suggesting Margaret Thatcher having problems with Parliament, so she asked the Queen to get rid of Parliament so she can rule without it. So I was really, really worried about how the Crown was going to portray the relationship between Margaret Thatcher and the Queen. But actually, it wasn't too bad. I didn't agree with it all. So, for example, the scenes about the Queen and Margaret Thatcher falling out over South Africa, I don't agree that that's what happened, but it is based on speculation at the time and since that there was a rift between the two women on that issue. So it is legitimate within the framework I set out earlier of what I think is and isn't legitimate about historical fiction. That is legitimate. And generally, I thought it showed the nuance and a degree of mutual respect, despite being very different people and probably having quite different beliefs. I thought it showed that quite well. However, the idea that Margaret Thatcher would ask the Queen to intervene in a political situation is a nonsense. Now, Margaret Thatcher is a divisive figure, and you may love her or you may hate her, or you may not know a lot about her because obviously it was some time ago. But the thought that she would try and drag the Queen into politics is absurd, and I thought that was a very bizarre thing and an unnecessary thing for the Crown to do because it was a powerful episode, even without all of that. So, on to big problem number 3. Now, I'm afraid this is the big one, so maybe I should leave it for last. What am I going to do? I'm going to do the big one as number 3. I just had a sip of my drink there. So, the reason I said I just had a sip of drink, maybe some of you are listening to something audio without seeing, and then you wouldn't know. You may have heard a slurp sound, and you may have worried that I was in some way overcome by some disease, which I am not, despite being in tier 4. Hello, Terry. Just talking about the Crown. So, Charles and Diana. This is a big one. Now, right. None of us know. I think we need to be really clear on this. None of us know what happened in the marriage of the Prince and Princess of Wales, of Charles and Diana, in the UK. And I grew up around this. I grew up in, well, I was born in 82. So I'm almost exactly the same age as the Duke of Cambridge, Prince William. So I grew up with these stories, and because I was a really super cool teenager, I was actually quite interested. I was a royal watcher even then. And yeah, thank you, Evelyn. I will chug it. I will chug it like there's no tomorrow. And I at that time there were all kinds of reports in tabloid media. Some were probably briefed from either Charles's camp or Diana's camp. They called it the Wars of the Wales by friends. You know, when in the newspaper you read friends of Charles, so that may even be Charles himself saying it. We just don't know. Some of it was entirely invented. Sometimes Charles's camp. Oh, you're a baby then, Terry. I'm 82. Charles's camp would have been straight down the line, played it with straight bat. Other times they would have spun it. Diana's camp, the same. Sometimes they'd played it with straight bat, sometimes they would have spun it. So we do not know. We do not know what the truth is. The only things we do know is that life isn't that simple, and it's never or rarely one person's fault. And I felt it was wrong that the Crown basically took all the anti-Charles stories and presented that as that's what happened. Of course, it's fictional, and of course, they can go with a particular portrayal, but it would have been kinder and fairer for them to have introduced some of the aspects about what Diana's own family have said made her a difficult person to be married to. Now, I am not anti-Diana, and I'm not saying anything excuses any bad behaviour toward anybody else, but it was not a balanced portrayal. The Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall still live. They are senior royals, and public opinion is being marginally affected. I suspect it is only marginal by a portrayal that is not entirely fair and is not entirely accurate. And Gail is saying that she feels that this season of Crown is a total misrepresentation of the character of Prince Wales, and I agree, because as someone, and many of you will be the same as well, that has tried to study the current royal family as almost like historical figures, which isn't quite right because they're still alive. Um, it There are some things that they portray Charles as, which I don't know if we can say they're true, but are certainly verified by other people who claim to have seen it. And one of those is a slight degree of petulance, a slight stroppiness, a slight needing to be taken seriously. But the force of that portrayal was unfair. And if you take, for example, the episode where they're in Australia, I have heard in other sources Charles sort of sulks a bit and says, "Oh, why don't they just split, cut Diana open down the middle, put her either side of me because no one wants to see me, they just want to see Diana, so maybe both sides should get to." Now, of course, that suggests a little bit of immaturity and petulance and all the rest of it. It does not suggest he treated her in the way that that episode showed. And I think to choose a portrayal of someone who still lives that is not balanced is unacceptable, even for fiction. So Dawn is agreeing with me about the Queen Mother, who was uncaring, cold-hearted, which is completely fair. I completely agree with you. I think everything I have ever read about the Queen Mother, and I've read this from a variety of sources, suggests that she was soft, kind, caring, and yes, formidable if you cross her, of course. You don't go through what the Queen Mother has gone through and don't have a backbone. But to portray none of this is coming across. We're already getting the savage, the cold, the sort of very formidable Queen Mother. What about her tenderness toward Charles? None of that comes across. Her just wanted to confine him to a life of misery. Well, that goes against every other account, and I think that's such a shame, and I think it's wrong. There, I said it. Evelyn remembers getting up at 4 a.m. to watch Charles being crowned as Prince of Wales and all the weddings. Love Diana, but it takes two to tango. Yeah, I completely agree. So, just for those of you, particularly those from outside the UK, by a bit of context, in the 90s, basically the country was split down the middle in the Wars of the Wales. So, you were either a pro Diana house or you were an anti Diana house and a sort of a pro Charles house. So my family, my mother was quite an anti-Diana. We were quite an anti-Diana family because my mother was pretty anti-Diana. So I'm not saying that didn't influence me. Um, and and we did tend to choose one side or another. Perhaps the whole world did to an extent. But I need to be sensitive to that because it isn't that simple. It is always about two people. Yes, probably in hindsight they shouldn't have got married, but isn't hindsight a wonderful thing? And is that even really for us to say anyway? Um, Even two people who are well suited don't always make it past the finishing line. And I think before the tragedy of Diana's death, which is undisputably a tragedy, I think they had gone their separate ways and were beginning to make it work for themselves in their own way. And maybe if it hadn't been for the tragedy of Diana's death, we would have seen that more played out in public, and there might have been more healing. Who knows? What I would say is that for all anyone wants to take a swipe at either Charles or Diana, they've raised two sons who adore the memory of Diana and also love their father very much. So they've obviously been able to find a way to reconcile the two, and perhaps the rest of the world should follow suit with the only two people that really have a right to make any judgment on it ever. Hello, Katie. I hope you're well as well. I was just saying, I'm actually very well. I am in tier two. So those outside the UK, in the UK, we've now been we were placed a few weeks ago into three tiers: tier one, tier two, tier three. Tier three being the strictest. Where I am on the edge of London has now been placed into a super tier, tier four, which basically means don't go outside unless you absolutely have to, and it basically means you can't go anywhere for Christmas. So it's extreme, but I'm absolutely fine. And as is my other half, but very sad. Obviously, we can't be with in-laws. Very sad, can't be with in-laws for Christmas. But yes, no, absolutely. I'm very well. Hope everyone else is. Yeah, I've gone off, Terry's gone off me a bit because Diana was a caring, giving, and generous person. She was just like past royals, a baby machine. Well, I don't doubt Diana. No, I think Diana was a caring and generous person. I'm just saying that in the 90s, the whole country picked a side, and me as a sort of 14, 15-year-old picked the other one, but that was wrong. Diana did some great stuff. Um, the stuff Diana did on AIDS and landmines, in particular, was a sophisticated, mature, considered, and compassionate use of her media power for absolutely great causes, and that cannot be taken away from her. Um, Megan says she loves Crown. Do you think the Queen did actually comment on Thatcher's policies? No, I don't. I think the Queen. Just a sec. I think the Queen is and was someone who was ruled by the notion that the sovereign, as a constitutional monarch, does not involve herself with politics. I do suspect that the Queen did have quite a sharply different view of policy to Margaret Thatcher. It is thought that the Queen Mother, it is thought, I mean, again, how do we know this? I don't know. But nonetheless, it is regularly thought that the Queen Mother was a fan of Margaret Thatcher, but that she was fairly unique within the royal family for being so. Um, so I think she would have. had problems with Thatcher's policies, but she would also have known that that's not her job. The issue around South Africa is interesting. It is certainly true that there were reports in the Sunday Times that the Queen was very cross about it all, and the press secretary did go. So there may be something there, but we just don't know. It seems odd to me. It seems to me that that's more of a palace misoperation than the fact that the Queen broke a habit of a lifetime. But who knows? Who knows? Um, so Dawn is glad that the Princess of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall, Prince of Wales, sorry, and Duchess of Cornwall are together now and happy with, and they obviously adore each other. No, I completely agree, and I think that had Diana lived, she would have found similar happiness, and perhaps it would have all been seen to have worked out well for both parties, albeit in a catastrophic way. Meghan has heard, can't remember where, that Diana and Charles actually would have coffee together at Casey Palace occasionally after their divorce and were being friends. Yeah, that might be true. I don't know. I've likewise. I've also heard that they may have they were getting back onto a better setting, and as I was saying earlier, you know, for most divorced parents, the priority is the kids. The kids have grown up in absolute awe of their mother's memory, who they clearly adored, and close to their father. The only two people in the world that have a right, really, to comment on the state of Charles and Diana's relationship seem to have made their peace with it all anyway. And that's, where I would leave that. The Crown did not, and I have a problem with that. Megan said, did Maggie Thatcher really cook for her cabinet? And when they came for meetings, that normal for PMs? Can't imagine Boris doing that. I think, yeah, so we're really funny in the way we treat our prime ministers in this country because, bear in mind, obviously, Megan, you know this because you're English, British, but the prime minister of the UK, as opposed to, say, the president of the US, is not head of state. So they're the head of government. The Queen is obviously head of state. So they're not treated with any great ceremony or splendor. We're quite funny because at the weekend, we give our prime minister this absolutely amazing country pad called Chequers, which is like not quite a palace, but it's a proper stately home, and they're treated not quite like royalty, but like nobility. In the in the week, we just stick them above a flat above Downing Street. Yeah, so and there is no cook, I believe. So I think Margaret Thatcher was quite house proud. She did consider, despite being a prime minister, she did still feel, and I'm not making comment on this, but this is how many women of her generation did feel, that it was also her duty to cook for her husband. So she would have done. Whether she cooked for her cabinet, I don't know. I think it's quite possible. No, Boris says he does a bit of cooking, doesn't he? Who knows? I mean, who knows? But no, I think that we treat our prime minister relatively humbly, not humbly, but during the week, and then give them a bit of splendour at the weekends. Um, so, Terry saying it was said that after Harry was born, Charles said that he had his heir and spare, pretty much saying Diana had got done a task and end of. Yeah, I've heard that too. Is it true? We just don't know. We just don't know. It's also been said, you know, that Diana was having affairs before Charles was. Was it true? I don't know. I don't know. But my point is really um with Charles Diana, as I say, everyone has a view. Everyone's view should be held lightly because we just don't know. Only two people have really a right to comment on the relationship between Charles and Diana and how it played out, which is their children. Both of them seem to have made their peace with loving both their parents dearly, and that, for me, is where I think the royal watching community, of which I consider myself a proud member, should probably leave it. So, Morag is saying horrible weather. It is horrible weather. Princess Diana encouraged hugging love. Yes, she did. She did actually, and I think in the AIDS situation that was very powerful because most of us, including me, I'm too young to remember how AIDS was viewed in the 80s. Um, but what she did was important, and what she did mattered, and no one could take that away from her. I wonder what the Queen's speech will say in 2020. Bless her. It will be brilliant. I know that. Um, I yes. The Fagin part was good. Yes, that was good. Lots was good. Lots was good. Um, uh, oh, Boris, yeah, I like that. Right. Just checking. Megan is saying, do you think that Balmoral did have Tesla? Right, okay, Megan. So this is my last point. You have done a sterling job in bringing me back. So no, the last of I'm going to have a sip of my lager. The last of my big problems with the Crown Series 4 is the Balmoral Tests, where the Thatchers were at not Downing Street, sorry, at Balmoral, and the suggestion is that the royal family pass all these tests to see whether they're going to fit in or not, and the Thatchers fail spectacularly because Margaret Thatcher, Margaret Roberts, as was, is from quite a humble background, and unlike previous prime ministers, perhaps wouldn't have necessarily mixed in those sorts of circles. Um, and it's all embarrassing. Well, I think that no, there. So I've checked this, and royal historians say that there is never has ever heard about these Balmoral tests the royal family are supposed to have. What they do, um, what everyone always says about the Queen is that she's very aware that people are nervous around her, and she tries to put them at their ease. Um, what I am fairly sure about is even in the 80s, um, the operation of both the palace and Downing Street was sophisticated enough so that every detail of the visit would have been ironed out before the Prime Minister arrived. So there wouldn't have been there wouldn't have been all this confusion. And also, it's slightly patronising both to the royal family and to the Thatchers, because yes, it is true, Margaret Thatcher was from a relatively humble background, um, but she hadn't just sort of walked out of her father's shop and become prime minister. She had been to Oxford, which was much more sort of hoity-toity, I suspect, than it is these days. Although who knows? She'd been an MP, she'd been a cabinet minister, she had been around things, and she would have rubbed circles to a much lesser extent with the royals before. So it's all a bit manufactured, and it's trying to present the huge contrast between the women. And in a sense, as a creative device, I get that, because it's hard, because all we see, if you just look at it in terms of two characters on TV and you don't know the content, you just see two posh women. You're like, what's the difference? So I like the fact that they did get across the contrast in the two women's backgrounds, because they're almost identical age and have had kind of parallel lives in very different ways. So that is interesting. But no, to suggest the royal family would be as vindictive as they were is unkind, unfair, and untrue. And that's really the final point I would make about season 4 of The Crown. Terry is still in tier 2. All right, Terry, rub it in. I should have, when all this kicked off, I should have gone to stay with my parents in Devon. Then I'd be in tier 2 now and could see them on Christmas. But never mind. Never mind. Megan says, it's great to see me looking so well. Thank you, Megan. I do look well, don't I? Do you stay safe? Will you stay safe as well? I don't know what tier you're in, but you know, what's the expression? Wash hands, space, face, something. Um, so Dawn did laugh when the Crown had Mrs. Thatcher turning up for dear Stork wearing high heels and a smart suit. Yes, no, there was. I mean, it was a good episode, and I think I have heard that it's true that Margaret Thatcher had no real interest in rural life at all, which is probably believable. She clearly spent her life in towns and cities. I just can't really believe that the sorts of details of what they'd be doing and what to wear wouldn't be ironed out. And I have seen pictures of Thatcher in slightly more rural attire. Um, uh, Joni from New Orleans says, sorry to let you know, we don't keep a register. I mean, although that said, you have missed the 4 points I was going to make, but you can watch them later. And we're just generally chatting now, mostly about the Crown. And Tony said, what do you think about the Michael Fagan little chat with the Queen? So that is based on a real incident. That did happen. Obviously, what we don't know is, and I suspect Buckingham Palace is security is tighter, as a result. The security, I'm going for a bit of tangent. Security wasn't. Security being as tight around public figures in the UK is a relatively recent phenomena. Um, when again in the sort of 70s, 80s, you could sort of wander up and down Downing Street. It wasn't until sort of terrorism of the IRA really creeped up that started to ramp up. So it did happen, and I do think a lot of that episode was probably quite true. Obviously, what we don't know, other than, and I could check this, but I haven't. Fagin has presumably talked about what he said to the Queen. How true that is, or his recollection, we don't know. What the Queen made to it, we don't know. But it was a good, yeah, it's broadly true. Um, does the Queen definitely have a regular weekly chat with each PM, or is that down to each PM? No, no, no. It's certainly not down to the PM. It's down to the Queen. The Queen doesn't have a lot of power anymore in terms of political power, but she does have, the right to warn, the right to advise, and the right to be consulted. And that weekly session is where she is consulted. There was some controversy in the 2000s that when Blair was really busy with the Iraq War, that he changed it to a phone call, but I doubt that was true. That happens. That definitely happens. Hands, face, space. You're quite right, Terry. Well done. Um, so yeah, lots of things to think about with the Crown. Like I say, I love The Crown. I think it's very well done. I just feel that historical fiction, and I do count The Crown as historical fiction, should stick to those two rules that I outlined at the beginning. And those were just on 4 occasions where I think The Crown let itself down and let all of us down. And as to whether it should have a disclaimer, yes, it should, because people do believe it's fact. Now, arguably, that's not the Crown's fault. But I would say two things. One is when they present at the end of each episode their documentary style facts, and this is what happened here and this and that, they are suggesting implicitly that it's all based on fact. And also, frankly, once you know, and you only have to look at some of the social media to know that people absolutely think it's fact. All we're asking for is a little disclaimer. Now, you have a little disclaimer on the White Princess, you had one on the White Queen. I can't remember whether you have one on the Tudors, although I do think you'd struggle to really believe the Tudors was factual. It was good, but um, I don't think it's asking too much or takes away from the Crown's freedom to put a little disclaimer on it. These people are alive, for crying out loud. I don't think a little disclaimer, a little text hurts. Um, Terry is doing some multitasking, listening to me. I'm watching the two Ronnies. Maybe I could be the third Ronnie. Um, so, oh yeah, detentions at school. Oh, sorry, it's going to feel weird. All these comments I make, isn't it, to people that are listening to this and not reading the comments. Yes. So Jacqueline is confirming that the Queen is does indeed have a weekly audience with the Prime Minister. As to what is said in those meetings, we don't really know because um, the Queen doesn't obviously tell us, and the Prime Minister's a sworn to secrecy. Um, Take care, Megan. See you soon. What we have heard, because prime ministers have perhaps felt at liberty to discuss this much, is that they're actually quite businesslike. It's not tea and cakes and talking about social niceties. The Queen has quite a formidable grasp of government. She's an experienced stateswoman. She's been doing this a long time, and she does keep them on their toes somewhat. Um, so Sally's saying, actually, compared to much, they've done well. I assume, Sally, you mean the Crown has stuck to a lot of fact. Yeah, right, so this is true, but this is part of the problem. The Crown is brilliant. I will never forget in the first season how blown away I was, the attention to detail. So there was one scene, I think the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh are talking, and in the garden outside the window, you just see Charles and Anne run past. They're on screen for like 2 seconds, and they look, because I paused it to check, they look almost exactly like Charles and Anne looked at that age. Their attention to detail is so good that it does make you feel that what you're watching is fact. So in a sense, they're a victim of their own success. Um, but of course, I'm including myself in this because a whole episode might be factual, and you're watching it, and then there'll be a scene between the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh, which is private, and you're like, oh, okay, I believe that because I believed everything else because it's all been so well researched. Oh, hang on a minute, no, no, no. The Queen nor the Duke of Edinburgh are going to have spoken to the producers of The Crown. Obviously, it's imagined, and that's fine. But I think it's because The Crown is so good and so factual in places that we just need that disclaimer um, to remind ourselves to just take it as fiction. That's all we're asking for. That's all I'm asking for. And I hope the Crown will consider giving it to me. The disclaimer, that is. So, more saying there's a new film of Mary Queen of Scots starting yesterday. Oh, is that? Even Dead That She Forgot. No, I completely agree. So, my view is if you are speaking about living people, you must not fundamentally distort what we know of their character. Um, and they should have a disclaimer. You absolutely should, because a lot of people believe, oh, if it's on. So I know people that believe. And I'm not talking about stupid people. Not that I believe anyone is stupid, but a lot of people believe that if something has been allowed to be put on TV, it must be true. So when I say to people, oh no, that's just imagined because it's fiction, be it really historical or be it more recent, but oh no, they wouldn't be allowed to. It isn't true. Well, who's stopping them? Yeah, no, of course they're allowed to because it's fiction. I just think they should have something that explains to people that's what the process is. And if people say it's patronising, I don't think it is. It's just people don't necessarily know how the media industry works, and why should they? Um, Dawn loves Helena Bonham Carter as Princess Margaret. Right. Has Helena Bonham Carter ever done anything that isn't excellent? I'm not sure she has. She is a wonderful Princess Margaret. And someone that can play both Princess Margaret and her mother so well. Is clearly a brilliant actress, and I don't think there's any doubt that Helena Bonham Carter is a great actress. Evelyn agrees with me on the disclaimer. Um, and your daughter-in-law, well, it sounds like your daughter-in-law is believing it, despite you helpfully correcting. Yes, well, that people do, and people will. Uh, you know, what can we do? We can carry on preaching the truth, can't we? As royal history geeks, it is our duty. It is our duty because people will often come to us. People say, "Look, I know you love royalty and history, so what are the facts?" So we need to keep reminding each other of what the facts are. Margaret is your spirit animal, Evelyn. I'm sure she'll be pleased to hear that. She's brilliant. She's brilliant. My other half of the stage, like, oh, I'm Princess Margaret's that way. You're not really. Yes, no, I saw a good program actually, factual on Princess Margaret, and she gets a bad press, but a lot of that's undeserved as well. What else are we saying here? So Terry likes to watch the programs for their inaccuracies. I'm a nightmare to watch those programs with as I am an historian. Yeah, exactly. We're all the same, aren't we? People hate watching these things with us because we're always like, oh, that didn't happen. Oh, that didn't. Oh, no, that didn't happen. No, shouldn't say that. Oh, no, he said that, not her. So people hate watching it with us, but what they don't realise is we're very, very valuable. And I know from just my own analytics of my blog that when something is on TV, people do Google and try to find out the truth because that's when I see a rush of traffic to one of my videos on my site. I know it's because something's on TV, normally either in the US or the UK, but potentially anywhere in the world. So people do want the truth. People want to find out whether things are real. Um, and fiction is how so many of us come to history in the first place, that there is a responsibility on fiction writers not to be right, but just to be clear about what they've done. So Terry drives her family mad, because she is a massive history geek. Um, yes, she likes pages where people share the same interest. Yeah, no, I do. I mean, that's really why I started this page, is because I'm generally forbidden to talk about it around with my loved ones. Ever since I was a kid, my parents like, literally, seriously, shut up about the Queen. If you mention the Queen again, we're going to literally throw you out of the house, even though you're 14 years old. And my family are royalist. It's not that they were anti the Queen; they were just fed up with me talking about royalty and history all the time. Um, but the other thing I like about fiction is that when these shows are big, so I remember when The White Queen came out, everyone at work was like asking me, oh, what, da, 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 da. And I remember on one of the whiteboards drawing a Plantagenet family tree to show how the branches of Lancaster and York worked. So it's quite nice when you get those moments and you can share your knowledge and people appreciate it for once. It doesn't last long. But at the same time, around the royal wedding, when the Cambridges got married, a lot of people ask me, why isn't Kate a princess? No, she is. You just don't call her Princess Catherine, but she is a princess, and explaining how all that worked. And for once, people believe it. and believe it. You always believe it, but people are interested, and that's it's a nice thing. Right. Well, I have recorded now my video on season because I'm gonna just so you all know, I'm gonna post this. I'm gonna do an article on what we've just talked about. So it is there for posterity. And I'm gonna use this video to go along with it, although probably edited as there's quite a lot of it's just me drinking beer or talking about other stuff. So I'll post that maybe tomorrow, hopefully tomorrow. Um, and now I'll probably try and do some more lives this week because, as I say, I'm in tier 4, so I can't really do anything else. And just seeing maybe people might be around now that we're in the holidays. I won't say Christmas in case it upsets Americans. Now that we're in the holidays, hopefully people are a bit more around and can join in the conversation. But for now, I shall love you and leave you. I'm still beer, absolutely. I shall love you and leave you and speak to you soon. Goodbye.